They'd gone to visit Vex's hometown, Shittown Nowhere, only twice. Once to visit an ailing father, and then later to help him move into a home. Both were miserable trips, the second far worse than the first. Initially, Carla had loved the quaint little high street, the rolling green fields spread out like patchwork tablecloths through the passenger window. The house was practically a mansion, and Carla declared that loudly at least 3 times within 5 minutes of pulling into the drive. She'd taken Vex's mother's rudeness and her elder sister's spiteful comments as a natural side effect of the stressful situation, particularly since Vex had spent the entire time practically mute. Clearly no one was feeling especially jolly. Carla's attempts at light-hearted conversation were either brushed off or outright ignored, so eventually she embraced the somberness too, furrowing her brow with the rest of them like she was acting a part in the play. When the inevitable blow-up happened, and what was it over again? Vex folding her father's clothes incorrectly, her sister criticising her short haircut, something so mundane and irrelevant it was barely worth mentioning. Carla calmly took Vex away from the situation, out for a walk to get some fresh, rousing air. It took about 10 minutes for them to find the local pub, and in their aloneness for those 2 hours, everything was fine. Bags were lit, complaining flowed, the wholesome rural accents which whittered in the background felt pleasantly Emmerdale, and the pints were so cheap Carla nearly had a heart attack. If we moved here, we could live like queens, she said, and for the first time since leaving Spaghetti Junction, Vex cracked a smile. They kissed over the table after a few too many pints, and the bartender decided to cut them off at the next round for their egregious drunken behaviour. "We have a right," the beehived bat proclaimed coldly, "to refuse service to anyone we believe to be over an acceptable limit." It was so obviously bigoted that Carla couldn't help but laugh. Where she came from, there was a whole gay village, for God's sake. And had this idiot with her stupid hair not noticed the old man 6 pints in who couldn't keep his head up, drooling onto his copy of the Daily Mail? Of course it was the Daily Mail. But rather than causing a fuss, Carla left it. Really, she felt she had to. Vex's jaw was so tight that entire weekend that Carla worried she'd chip a tooth. They never went back to the side of the family, made excuses every holiday, and no one really followed up. Carla stopped making little jibes at Vex's middle-class upbringing. After seeing her home life, it just didn't seem in good taste.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Edmonds. I'm the editor-in-chief of Page and Screen magazine. I'm here today with Kathleen Davies, the author of Texture, which was published in our 7th issue. You can go read it on our website. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Of course, of course. Now, I want to start out pretty straightforward. I want to get to know a little bit about what inspired this story. Where did it come from for you?
So yeah, it's a story about Brexit, but it's really about an intersectional queer relationship. So I did my master's degree in Birmingham, which was a lot of fun, although a very, very difficult year. But I did love being in this kind of massive city that was really diverse and really, really beautiful because I did grow up in a rural Yorkshire countryside kind of village. And I like the idea that different privileges offer sometimes different problems, different perspectives, and there's quite often a very limited idea of what we think of when we think of like an Indian family or Indian culture or a white middle class family. And I kind of wanted to explore like different ways of being queer, different ways of showing love, different ways of handling fundamentally massive political turmoil because, during Brexit, there was all of this. There was this constant political turmoil, and it did, it broke up many, many marriages, caused a lot of issues, and I wanted to explore the kind of an almost romantic side to that, like a way of like just going through the struggle together and it being really beautiful, which I think is fundamentally a really, really queer experience and has been historically for a long, long time. So yeah, it was inspired by where I used to live, inspired by the politics that are happening at the moment, inspired by my personal life experiences, and yeah, yeah, that's why I ended up writing it.
Yeah, I love everything that you said, but I love the point you made about kind of taking a look at the broader politics through this a smaller relationship, through one moment, one couple, two people. Because I know Obviously, I am American, so I viewed Brexit from the outside. But we tend to look at politics at these grand movements, these grand moments, and forget that people are just living through them, doing their best to kind of move with the change, experience that, adapt, so on and so forth. So I love that perspective in this story, and I think it really helps to highlight all of the tensions that these characters are going through, both politically and personally with their families and everything. Absolutely. So I love
Thank
that
you.
element. Sorry, just gushing about your story.
No, no, I mean, I love it. Please continue.
Yeah. So do you find that you frequently incorporate that kind of political perspective into your writing?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think I'm a very, very political writer. Um, so my first book that got published was called Cheeky Bloody Articles, which is kind of a Yorkshire, I think it's Yorkshire, it might just be Northern in general, expression that means someone who's a bit, being a bit cheeky. They're a cheeky bloody article. But all the stories in that were basically political, and I definitely get angry at the politics of society that we're existing in at the moment, or whatever's going on, and find it cathartic to sort of write through it, looking from lots of different levels of perspective. I think because sometimes it feels almost hopeless, like there's very little you can actually practically do to help when there's a lot of injustice and difficulty. And one of the ways that I find it easier to do something just for me is to think about it from lots of different perspectives and consider how people will be feeling and putting out there to see if it resonates with people. And it ends up being like on a personal level quite cathartic and therapeutic to have a channel for that rage and for that frustration or upset. So yeah, I'm very much, a left-wing feminist queer writer, and so anything that I write is going to be have that as a kind of thread running through it, even when I'm looking from different perspectives that aren't my own, as I kind of do for like this story with these two characters who are obviously older than I am in real life and obviously have very, very different upbringings. Uh, yeah, it's kind of just a way of playing and thinking about how different politics would affect different people in a creative way, I think. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that, I don't know, I think that speaks to kind of a really, really healthy kind of perspective on politics because in my this is just my personal opinion, but I think that a lot of times people make decisions that are worse for the whole when they fail to consider those kind of different perspectives. Like part of moving forward, being progressive in a political sense, but also not, is just kind of taking into consideration, thinking, how is this affecting other people? How is this affecting people in different backgrounds, different experiences? So, absolutely makes sense. Love it. Now, you mentioned writing from kind of those different perspectives in this story. Is it a challenge at all for you to kind of take up that new mindset and get into the character's head in that way?
Yeah, yeah, I so worry about it. I think so much of what I do, I worry it's going to be problematic. And I've got to try to remember that when I'm writing for a character, I'm writing for that character who will contain elements of myself and elements of different other people that I've met and, become this whole brand new thing. And that character doesn't represent the whole. But it's difficult. I mean, like, I'm a white person and half of my story was about being a working class second generation immigrant in Birmingham. I have no experience of that. I've met people like that and friends of people who have those experiences. And it's almost like, okay, what's more problematic? Is it more problematic for me to try to speak to experiences that I've not personally had? Or is it more problematic for me to only consider the perspective of white middle class Yorkshire queer people? And the thing is, like, I've done so many stories about white middle class Yorkshire queer people because that's who I am. And everyone who starts writing, I think, starts writing from a little bit of an autobiographical perspective. Um, and it's dull. And what do you want all of your stories to only ever contain characters that are completely like you? No one really wants that. but you want to get it right. And it's hard. And like, race is one particular example of it. I've got quite radical ideas about gender identity and politics and things like that, which is why I use like she, they pronouns. But I've written trans characters that have been incredibly difficult and complex people and been absolutely terrified that when I published my book Fluid, it would just be another another trans character that's kind of a villain um in a sea of villainous trans characters, and I was so concerned about it because it was semi based on a real person, and that person was really abusive. I didn't really want to shy away from that, and I found it so difficult and so complex. Thankfully, when I had the book launch, I gave it to my friend Tayside, who is also a writer, poet, a trans woman, and she read through it and was just like, "Oh, oh my God, no, this is great!" And I'd listened to Sean Fay talk about how she was sick of seeing trans people only being like these wise, completely perfect, morally ideal characters, and thought, okay, maybe it's all right then. But you're constantly full of doubt, and especially when the issue of privilege is involved. But what I will say is, well, I think everyone should try it. I think everyone should try it by listening to people who actually have those experiences, and everyone should do it with the perspective that whatever I write about working class Indian heritage in Birmingham will never be as good as what a working class Indian will write about it because they'll know about it more. And that's okay. And to just kind of accept that and go, okay, so I'm dipping into a perspective that's not my own and trying to be empathetic with it and taking from the experiences things that are not my own. But yeah, to have to take from it an experience that's not my own, um, but to do it in a way that's really trying to be respectful is kind of the crux of it. But yeah, it's difficult and you're constantly full of self-doubt and you don't want to. I think if I was too confident about it, it would be terrible, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. That's how I feel about it too. You can't be kind of cocky about it because then you lose view of that respect. You lose view of kind of stopping, reflecting, thinking, how is it
Mm,
impacting people? How am I influencing this perspective? No,
mm.
absolutely. Now you've mentioned now a couple of books that you've written. Can you tell me a little bit more about those?
Yeah, so I've published 3 books so far. It's with a really small independent American publisher called Four Horsemen. And my friends always joke that they mostly publish like porn and weird kinds of erotica and genre fiction and stuff like that, which I love because I'm like, yeah, down with the canon, down with all this stuff that, is told to be good literature. I like anything that's a little bit subversive. So I've got contract for 5 books with them, I think, and I've written 4 of them so far. So my first one was Cheeky Bloody Articles, which was a collection of short stories, and then I published a memoir of like a kind of traumatic experience that I went through when I was doing my master's. And that was called I'm Marvel. And then I did Fluid, which was my master's dissertation, kind of extended. It was like another collection of short stories, but these were interwoven and they were all about the 1970s and body fluids and art and all that sort of stuff. And then So Clever You're Thick, which is another short story collection. I think of it as like the B-sides, the ones that didn't make it into the Cheeky Bloody Articles in the first cut, or like that have been written since very quickly edited and shoved in. And that's coming out later this year. I've got one more to do with them, and I don't know what I'm going to do. I've got I've got my PhD novel that I can give them. Although my PhD supervisors are like, "Oh no, don't do that. Save that. See if you can get a proper agent and do that properly." Which like maybe I'll try. I don't know. So yeah, I've got that. I could write some more short stories. I had an idea of doing something with AI or like a kind of collaborative project with some of my friends. I don't know. But yeah, those are the books that I have out at the moment.
Nice. And when you're putting together the short story collections, do you kind of start with, oh, I want these stories to be around this theme, or do you pick and choose ones that you've already written and kind of find the theme that way? How do you put them together?
Yeah, it's very random. I mean, like I think if I was doing it again, I would be a little bit more careful of making them thematic and having a particular idea for each of them. But with the first book that got published, I sent off a couple of short stories and they were like, "That's fantastic. Yeah, we'll do a collection." And I thought, "Great." And I just chose what I felt at the time were the best ones. I think in hindsight, I'd look back and be like, "Oh, maybe not." But and then put them together kind of randomly. In a way that I felt flowed, putting some shorter ones next to some longer ones so that they weren't too heavy, like ending on my BA dissertation piece, which is 6,000 words, so like a really, really long one. Um, but in terms of like theme, there is kind of similar themes all the way through it, because these were my first short stories that I was writing from when I was, starting at 18 or whatever. And they are queer political feminist stories, because that's what I was doing. So they have similar themes kind of running throughout them as it is. Um, and again, with So Clever You're Thick, that was just like, okay, I need something um fast. I've got this contract that I've got to meet. What short stories are can I hobble together? Like the ones that initially I decided weren't good enough. Okay, well, I can polish them up a bit and see if they'll do. And these are the ones that I've only just written. Like, are they okay? Well, maybe they're the best. Maybe they're the worst. I'm not sure yet because they're still baby new. And then I got friends to kind of look over them, and they were the ones that kind of made me feel a little bit better about it. They were like, no, this is an okay collection. And then I put those together alphabetically because I thought that was quite nice, moving through in an order. But yeah, I wish that I could claim that there was some sort of genius, methodical thing that I was doing to make it so that it was this amazing encapsulated work of art. But a lot of it was just what felt nice. And I don't know if there's any artistic value in that or if people would even agree, but that's how it went.
I mean, the point of reading is just to enjoy reading. So if it feels nice, seems like enough for me.
Yeah, good, good. I hope everyone else thinks that too.
Yeah, so when you are kind of trying to figure out a way to phrase this as a question. Um, so writing itself can be a really isolating process. When you're sharing and getting other people's opinions, getting your friends' opinions, is that nerve-wracking at all? Is that something you're super comfortable with? Kind of, how do you feel about that?
Pretty comfortable with it because a lot of my friends are writers, and because I did my degree in creative writing, my master's in creative writing, I'm now finishing my PhD in creative and critical writing, and a huge chunk of especially those first two degrees was workshopping. And was workshopping with relative strangers and sometimes people who didn't like you. So you would be giving out these stories to people and sometimes you would have like been critiquing theirs the week earlier and you just have to not be personal with it. And one of the things that I think quite good at is I'm not a perfectionist. I'm very much a that'll do it. I do something, I share it out, I go, what do you think? And if everyone goes, this is terrible, then I'm not too precious about it because I've not like molded it to be absolutely perfect before I dared and let anyone lay their eyes on it. If I say it's rubbish, it probably because it probably is, and I need to take a look at it and do it again. So I've got little workshop groups with my friends who are also poets, also writers. We do a lot of open mic sort of stuff and a lot of angry political queer poetry that we sort of scream at each other. And we all share it. So, I'm in awe of my friends and how talented they are. And sometimes it can be intimidating if somebody shares something and it's utterly incredible and what you want to get some feedback on, you're like, oh God, maybe I should work on this a little bit longer before I share it after that. But yeah, no, I don't necessarily feel too intimidated about sharing it because I think over time I've stopped seeing myself as like this person that has to be this big important writer. I think I used to when I was young and I was crippled in insecurity about it. And now I'm sort of just like writing is something I do and it's something I do because I enjoy it. And I'm happy for anyone to read it. And if they think it's rubbish, it probably is. And if they think it's great, then great. But it's not the sole only part of my identity. And being in kind of like punk scenes and DIY scenes and community scenes and grassroots activism and things like that helped with it. It's less so about making this absolutely perfect, impeccable piece of writing and more about putting your ideas out there, seeing if it resonates, working on it, shaping it, making it all a gradual process. And they say nothing's ever finished, it's only abandoned. And I definitely feel like that with a lot of my work. It just gets to a point where I go, I think I've done what I can with this, and then I send it out. And so that's kind of how it is for me. So I would say no, I don't get nervous. I do find it easy, but that's because I've passed the point of insecurity and past the point of confidence into almost self-indifference and just like loving being a part of the arts in general without putting a gradable or a objective measurement of goodness on it.
Absolutely. I had a similar journey with like understanding and kind of accepting rejections. Like at this
Mm.
point, there have been so
Yeah.
many. I'm like, I don't even care. Like it's just there. It just is. Whatever.
Yeah. I do a lot of teaching creative writing as well, and I teach a lot of creative writing to teenagers. And one of the things that I always say is like, send out your work to kids' magazines, and if you get accepted, congratulations, you're a real writer. And if you get rejected, then congratulations, because you're really a real writer. And like, everyone should be aiming for something mental, like 100 rejections a year or something crazy like that. Um, because it's just throwing enough stuff at a wall and seeing if it sticks. And sometimes your work will be amazing, and it's just that, you know, it's not in vogue at that particular point, or they've got another piece that's a bit too similar in that particular issue or whatever, and just got to keep trying, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, have you found that teaching creative writing has influenced the way you write at all?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. So, all that stuff that I was banging on about before about, being that self-indifference and not seeing it as like a way to define myself. You get a lot nicer about yourself and your own level of writing when you're reading the work of teenagers who you're really fond of and who you really want to do well. Because some of them are writing stuff that's like, technically not great because, they're 14, 15, or at times cliche and a little bit ridiculous, but it still brings me so much joy reading it, and it's still like a really nice reflection of who they are as a person and where they can possibly go. It's like looking at like the seeds before they turn into plants kind of deal. And when you think of it that way, you wouldn't say to them when they're handing in this thing for me to mark, like, well, that's ridiculous, or that's a cliche, or that's derivative, or I just wouldn't say that to them. I'd say like, this is great. Think of ways maybe you could make it more original, and this is great. But just have a look at some of the sentences you're using and think if they've been used before in other places. And I'm just kind of now a little bit more gentle like that with myself and my own work. I am fully aware that my first drafts will be rubbish because everyone's first drafts are rubbish, and that's okay. And when I'm reading through something that I wrote and even published in the past, and I feel that sting of like, oh God, I can't believe I published that. That was awful. I mean, God, there's a typo in the first sentence. Like, that's ridiculous. That doesn't even make sense. This is terrible dialogue. I just sort of think, okay, cool. And look how far you've come from that. Like, you published that, and now you can see what's maybe needs to be altered with it. Well, that's progress. And then you can do that the next time. And so, yeah, I would definitely say that being having that affection for these kids helps me with my inner child and being empathetic towards myself. Uh, yeah, if that makes sense. And also, a lot of them are really genuinely just fantastically brilliant, which is always inspiring, seeing the work of other writers, young as they may be.
Absolutely, 100%. I actually just taught my first creative writing class this past spring. So
How did
I
it go?
it went really well. I was so relieved. I was so nervous going into it because I had never taught creative writing before. I taught other English classes, but not that. So I'm like, oh gosh, what do I have to teach them? What do I have to say? But they were all really, really wonderful and so many different perspectives. I think I
Mm.
got lucky because almost the entire class really loved like horror fiction and cryptids and
Oh,
creepy things.
great.
And like that's my area. I love it. So
Yeah.
I'm thriving.
Oh man, that's really, really good. I love it as well that you can get like creative writing teachers that are more towards the genre side of things as well. Because I went to UEA, University of East Anglia, which is quite prestigious in England for creative writing. Although less so now, I think there's a lot of stuff I can go into about UEA and what they're doing at the moment, but I won't bother because that's not the podcast. But it's very lit fiction focused and it's very like neat, clean lines with like no adjectives or very few adjectives and definitely no adverbs. And, they want a lot that doesn't necessarily dip into genre fiction. And I think it's such a shame. I think it's such a waste. Like, there's a popularity in genre fiction for a reason, and it's because it speaks to people. And yeah, I love the idea of having a creative writing teacher. He's a bit more like you. He's like, yeah, horror, cryptids, let's just have fun with this.
I definitely understand. When I was in undergrad getting my bachelor's, I did not take a single creative writing class outside of script writing and screenwriting, because I love my university. I love it so much, but the English teacher, the creative writing teachers there were very much memoir and write from your experience and literary fiction. And that was just not what I wanted to write. So I'm like, it kind of did a number on me for a while where I was like,
Yeah.
okay, so that's proper writing. And that's not what
Yeah.
I wanted to write. And I kind of messed with my head. But then life happened and grad school happened and I wrote weird shit and they loved it. So it worked.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. They tell everyone, write what you know, write what you know. And I think they need to know to add to that, write what you know, or else what you're willing to research. Because the reason we have so many novels and short stories about American white men who drink whiskey and smoke too many cigarettes and want to be writers is because that's what they know. And I love some of those books, but it's a lot, isn't it? And like, it's good to be able to branch out and do different things and get really, really creative with it without necessarily being looked down on, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it kind of perpetuates what you were talking about earlier with kind of writing from different perspectives. If you constantly write what you know, then there's
Yeah.
going to be a dearth of perspectives, especially unfortunately, since it's difficult for BIPOC authors to get a voice in publishing. So it
Yeah.
kind of perpetuates that lack, unfortunately. Um, so absolutely. Uh, so with um, this is kind of a tangent just because my brain is not working and I can't think of a good segue. Um, you find that you prefer writing short stories or novels? Which kind of format do you prefer?
Um, I don't know. I like both. I like writing short stories because it's like one small moment. And I think when you have a really good short story idea and you're able to go from beginning to end and not like really just like encapsulate a scene. I think that's really lovely. But what I like about writing novels is the way it kind of builds up. So I have like my PhD novel is called Stitches and it's massive. It's like 80,000 word horror, multiple character voices, all like interconnected and interweaving. It's taken so many drafts and so many edits, and it's all about this reiteration and yeah, redoing everything. But what I quite like doing is that you could write a chapter much quicker than you could write a short story of a similar length because you don't have to make every single sentence like gold as you're putting it down or like a really lovely sentence. It can just be a filler to get from point A to B to connect these different things. And then you can go back and edit it and make sure that the writing like fizzles and pops and all the rest of it and play around with that. But I think for the idea of like graphing this like massive thing and connecting all those dots can be so fulfilling. And I found that with Fluid as well. Like I was then writing short stories, but the short stories were all connected to each other and each had to be based on a particular thing that was very specific. Artwork, any kind of artwork, but from the 1970s had to involve body fluids in some description and then had to have a character that was telling that story and that character had to already be some way planted in the book and the other stories that were connected and then like connecting them. Yeah, so it was like all of these self-imposed barriers, which meant that creativity was actually almost easier because I had like all these prompts that were leading to a thing, and when it connected and when it made sense, it was like, yeah, that's great. This could be that character story, and this could be this. And sometimes with writing a novel as well, it can feel like that, like connecting these strings and like building up a bigger picture in this massive map. And that's really, really nice. But when you get a fantastic short story idea and you get to just sit down and yeah, crack on with it. And it can just be like not a plot you have to follow, but just a moment that you're taking. I think that's really nice. I think that's a really nice feeling too. So I don't know, different strokes. I think if you said to me right now, what would you rather do? Sit down and write a novel or sit down and write a short story? A short story, because I don't have time. But in general, I think there's positives and negatives for all of them.
Definitely, definitely. And could you tell me a little bit about your editing process? Do you have any tips, tricks, suggestions for people who are maybe struggling with editing?
Oh God. Well, anyone who's read my books will probably know that editing isn't always my strong point. Like I have a lot of typos and a lot of repetitions and things that need to be like quickly edited away, or I'll be reading it on the printed page and go, that needs more work. I should have done that. And like, yeah. So I'm maybe not the best person to ask about editing because I'm not a perfectionist and because I rush and because I like create a massive amount of material really, really quickly and then send it out really quickly. But what I will say is read it again, put it in a drawer, leave it for 6 months, take it out, read it again. Workshop, see what other people have to say because you will miss something that they will know. And also just hearing from different perspectives is super, super vital. Like if you have a diverse group of friends, they won't let you get away with doing something that's not acceptable or inappropriate. And if you have a group of writerly friends as a writer, then they won't let you get away with doing anything that's kind of cliche or ridiculous or doesn't make sense or sounds kind of cheesy. So you've got to like, I think, shake off the idea of cringing, put yourself out there and get other people's perspectives and also allow your future self to be a different perspective as well. If you stare at something for too long, all the words start to look funny. Give yourself a break of at least a week, I would say, and then look at it with fresh eyes when you're redoing the editing process because guarantee that not doing that is what leads to this experience of looking at something after it's out and going, oh my God, how did I miss that? It's because you were looking too closely. You couldn't see the forest for the trees.
I love the way you phrased something in there, letting your future self be a different perspective. I love that phrasing so much because it's so true. I can't tell you how many times I've looked back at an old thing and I'm like, I wrote that. And sometimes it's a good thing and sometimes it's not. Um, but having that distance is super, super helpful. I know, I've also heard I think I've tried this. I don't remember if I've tried this. I should probably know if I've tried this. I've also heard of kind of changing the font in the document to help you kind of look at it anew, tricks your brain into thinking of it as something different, which might also play
Oh,
into why it's easier to see typos when it's actually finished and published because it's in a new format.
wow. Oh, I didn't know that, but that would make sense. Yeah.
It might work. I feel like I've tried it like once and it helped, but I should probably do it more.
I'm strictly Times New Roman. I won't write in anything else. And then like my students, they hand things in, they've got all this like fancy curly font and all of this, and I'll just get it on my computer and go, absolutely not. Highlight the whole thing. Times New Roman. It's the only thing I can read. It's the only thing that I find enjoyable. So yeah, that's probably elitist in itself, actually, now I think of it like that, but oh well.
I understand. The only time I will ever write something in a different font is just if I'm writing it quickly in my phone notes and then sending
Mm,
it over to like a Word document, but it only lasts for like a day and then it's Times New Roman. So I understand.
yeah.
Now, you had mentioned doing kind of like slam poetry events. You write poetry as well?
Yeah, not well. I'm not very good at poetry. In and Marvel, the book that I wrote, it was a memoir about my partner's suicide, and that was really, really difficult for me. But he was an amazing poet, and he did some fantastic work. And I kind of wrote a couple of poems for that to sort of emulate him or to attempt to emulate him. Um, so they were published I don't necessarily think they have much artistic value beyond demonstrating um, a grieving mindset and the futility of attempting to mimic a voice that's now gone. Um, so yeah, I did write poetry for publication then. I wrote what I call my my one good poem, um, from Balconies, which is about the COVID experience, and that got published, and that was pretty good. There's a couple of short stories that I turned into poems to see if they would work, and they got published, and that was fine. But yeah, for the slam poetry events, I do it because it's fun, and I do it because I get to advertise my books that way. And poets are massive saps, and they feel sorry for me, so they do tend to buy them there. But like, it's the style of slam poetry I do is very much A B A B, consistent rhythm, consistent rhyming, shouting out angry political stuff, usually about, the genocide in Gaza or the queer experience, and just getting to be furious on stage for a little bit before my friends who are all much better poets go up on stage and they're furious about the world for a little bit, and then we all drink wine and, smoke too many cigarettes, although I've quit as of this year, and, have an amazing time. So yes, I write poetry, but again, it's like an uncomfortable thing where I don't like to say I'm a poet, because when I read other people's poetry or I see other people perform poetry, I'm always like so in awe of the fact that I can't do that, but I love it so much. So it's essentially like I'm watching Bob Ross videos and trying to paint a portrait and then being like, oh yeah, I'm an artist. That's how it would feel the equivalent to be like, yeah, I write poetry as well. Um, but I do love it. It's great. I think everyone should do those kind of events, whether it's slam poetry or like local music scene or anything else where it's like small groups of people getting up on stage and screaming about how they feel. Yeah, that's one of the best experiences I think in life. So I think everyone should do that all the time if they can.
Yeah, that can be really intimidating. I agree. It's wonderful and I love the community that can come from that. I personally am terrified of public speaking. I really went into the wrong profession for being terrified of
Yeah, I
public
was gonna
speaking.
say, okay, you're a teacher, yeah?
Yeah, yeah. It's awful. But I actually kind of really recently only started doing poetry readings. I'm also not a poet. I feel have the same feelings there. I tell my students, I'm like, I'm not a poet. Like, I'll give you feedback on your poetry because I taught fiction and poetry, and I'm like, but take it with a grain of salt. I'm not a poet. Um, but I started going to a couple of poetry readings recently, and they're incredibly intimidating, but at the same time, really wonderful. Like once you're there and once you're part of that community, it can be a really, really great thing. Um, so absolutely. I've not gone to the screaming about your feelings type poetry yet, but I want to. It sounds much more fun than the ones I've been to.
I love it. I think it's so great. But I mean, I've got a friend who's also a writer, also an artist, mostly an academic, called Adam Marich Cleaver. He's also the Mara. He does his own music and stuff. So I'm just plugging all my friends here just during his podcast as well. But he said about these events, I wish people would confess to me a little less. I was like, no, that's the point. I love it. I love to go up there and confess. And then I sort of nicked that for a poem as well. Like, should I confess less, stress my progress less, digress a little? Yeah. So, I think that the screamy, angry feeling stuff is great, but I know it's definitely not for everyone. Also, I'm sorry if you can hear that screaming. It's my cat. She's really old and infirm, so she just screams. We don't know what for.
That's so precious.
Yeah, yeah. See, she's screaming about her feelings. Good stuff. Go on, Fliss.
Exactly, exactly. So tell me a little bit. I don't think we've talked about this quite yet, but tell me a little bit about what got you interested in writing in the first place. How did you kind of get your start?
Um, okay, so I have a prepared answer for this that I use for a lot of podcasts, which is that when I was 16, I entered a creative writing competition at my sixth form college and I won second place and got 50 quid. And I thought it would be lucrative, ha ha ha. ha. So I applied for creative writing at UEA. And I've told that story a lot. And it's a good kind of origin story, I think. But I've been writing forever, and I wrote as a kid. I had imaginary friends from when I was very, very young, and they had complicated backstories and were with me all the time and kind of worked as a form of protection. And I wrote a lot of poetry and a lot of stories when I was a little, little kid, usually just stuff about animals and things like that, you know. So I think I've written forever, really. I think I started taking myself seriously as a writer, or like, you know, I've taken myself too seriously as a writer probably when I was 18 and I started doing this UEA creative writing course, and it became like an aesthetic and what I wanted to do and what I wanted to achieve. Um, but it's reading, it's reading. I love reading books. I have loved reading books since I was very little. I love studying and analyzing fiction. Like I've really enjoyed doing that at school. And so like going along with it and finding opportunities to do it myself was super, super easy. Um, and another thing was the Moby Dick episode of The Simpsons, where Marge sits down and writes herself a novel and Flanders is really fit. I don't know, every single time I watched that episode as a kid, I just remember thinking, I'm gonna go write a book. And I attempted so many, like, my sister would be waiting for like the next book in a series to come out that she wanted to read, and I would, 5 years younger than her, absolutely she did not want me to do this. I was like, I'll write it for you. I'll write an alternative next book for you so you can read that while you wait, which she didn't love. And I used to write vampire stories. I went through a very cringe period where I was writing fan fiction about all my favorite bands. Like, it's just always been like a method of catharsis for me. And when I realized as I was getting older that it could be quite a useful political tool, therapeutic tool, social tool, it then became like a massive part of my life, yeah, and my identity. Although, like I said before, I am trying to step away from that having an identity as a writer because it can become, yeah, just overwhelming.
Absolutely. I was actually, this might not really relate, but in my brain it relates. I was actually just talking to another friend of mine who's an artist. They do the cover art for our issues, actually. We were talking about kind of building brands as creative on social media specifically, and how you kind of have to turn that into a personality and kind of curate your personality. Um, I'm curious if you've had any like experience or difficulties with that, trying to like find yourself outside of the writer identity while still kind of doing this social media stuff.
Yeah, I hate the social media stuff. I hate it. I hate it so much. Like the people that read my books and the people that buy my books are my friends and my family and people who are into short stories and that niche stuff. So other people who publish for my publisher, for instance, or like people who, um, you know, I'll see at events and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, sure, I liked what you did. I'll buy something." But like I've got to almost pretend to be this successful version of myself that I'm not quite yet and like present myself forward, and I find it so cringy. I hate it so much, and like it's in part of my contract which I don't follow in more ways than one, that I've got to post on Instagram once a week and post on Facebook. I've got to have at least three different author channels. I've got to have an author website, and I've got to put that on a newsletter that I do regularly. But I was writing these newsletters and no one was reading them, because why would they? Why would people read what I've been up to as a writer in a week? If people want to know what I've been up to as a writer in a week, we'll go to the pub and we'll talk about it, because they're the people that care about my writing as my friends and family, not these strangers on the internet. And there's this kind of fake it till you make it identity of like, well, you've just got to keep plugging away, pushing yourself out there, and then you'll build up this online brand, and then you'll have the success. And I don't want to do that. I've tried it. It's hard and I don't like it. So I end up just like posting these statuses like, got a new book coming out, new things soon, away updates, and it'll get 2 likes, and one of them's from my mum. And oh God, I can't stand it. I find it like humiliating and difficult, and what I want to do and what I think I should be able to do as a writer, because I don't think it should be part of my job description to be an expert at marketing the self, is I want to sit at home, write write my stories, have a nice cup of tea, do my editing, and send them away to the magazines and the journals and the short story collections who will market that bear. And if people want to read it, they want to read it. But what I hate is like that chasing people around, like trying to force them to consume my work when they don't want to, and I don't want them to if they don't want to. But oh God, yeah. So in terms of becoming my own brand, yes, I've tried it. Yes, I've had difficulty with it. No, I don't do it anymore. Like I think I still have a Facebook page floating around somewhere that's kind of like, oh, here's a picture of my cat and a selfie of me holding a book that I wrote, and like, here's what I've been up to in January 2023. But the only people who follow it are my friends who follow my actual Facebook anyway, because they're my friends. And, it's the same on Instagram and it's the same with the website. The website, I will say, is handy only because I've got like an archive of everything I've published. So I can just like copy that link into the bottom of emails if anyone's interested in reading anything else that I've published. But yeah, oh, I'm terrible at it. I don't like it. Um, and I'd just rather not. I'd rather be a little hermit and occasionally have nice conversations with nice people like you. And that's marketing myself, and that's okay. But I can't do the social media stuff. I just can't.
Yeah, no, I agree. We were both, when Rachel and I were talking, we were both like, this is an awful evil. It should not be necessary. I completely understand. Um, Absolutely. If we will, in the description of this video, if anyone wants to find your work, we will link your website there. And if you want to resurrect any or send us an Instagram link, we can share that as well. If you think it doesn't matter, we don't have to do that either. It doesn't, it's totally fine. I was talking to someone yesterday or 2 days ago, and he was like, I might have a website somewhere. So it's certainly not necessary.
That is the right attitude. I agree with that. I think as well, like, if you get super successful and you require having a social media presence and you require that you have to have a website, then great. But you shouldn't be forced to do it when you've not reached that level of success yet. And I'm still very much at a local writer level, which I'm fine with. So I don't want to be online pretending to be this big writerly star when I'm not. It's awful. It's awful.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'm in the same boat. I often feel like I present myself as much more established and accomplished. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like I get blown away every time I talk to someone on an interview and I'm like, oh God, who am I to be interviewing you? Like what? So I
Oh, but
completely
but you've got the page and screen, which is like hugely successful, right? Like,
oh yeah, we're so successful now. Okay. No, it's great. It's great. And I do think though, to that point, as writers, we tend to kind of undersell our successes because you're talking about, oh, I have a 5 book deal with this publisher, and that's just blowing my mind. And so kind of having it helps to have outside perspective sometimes because I think a lot of us are a bit more successful than we feel we are. Well,
Mm. Yeah, for sure. And like I think being British has something to do with that as well. Being a woman has something to do with that as well. And I think it comes naturally to people like us maybe to do ourselves down. And we're told all the time not to be arrogant. Maybe we overcorrect.
mhm, mhm. I 100% believe that. Absolutely.
Yes.
Last question is a bit of a cheesy one, a bit of a generic one, but I just like to ask if you have any advice you would like to give to writers out there. What's your one thing of advice that you would give to people?
Okay. I think there's quite a lot, but I think my main thing would be no one can tell your story. No one else has your voice. So just write your way into it. Just try. Even if you're like writing rubbish and you're like, this is absolutely rubbish, it will be at first. But that's okay. Just get the words down on the page and you can play with them later. Um, because your voice is important and people deserve to hear it, and you're the only one that can do it. So that would be my advice to writers, and that's what I tell all my young people as well. Because we are all special, I think.
Absolutely. That's fantastic advice. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for doing this interview. It's been great.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a joy.